Welcome to the Big Three, where we get to talk about this week's sermon from North Boulevard Church of Christ in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We'll take questions and make observations from you, me, John, and this week's special guest, Lori Shea.
I think it's actually pronounced Shia. Shia.
No, it is not pronounced Shia.
Right.
Yeah, if you're a telemarketer, I'll hang up on you if he says Mashiach.
Hey, we had another great lesson this morning from Kelvin Teemer in our Upside Down Movement series. So if I had to summarize it, man, he's so good. Like when he puts those slides up there that kind of capture everything, I want to use one of those. But basically just to say, wherever you are, think that God may use you there, so you have been sent there.
Yeah.
Which is a conflicting thing for me, because I don't want to blame God for where some of the crazy places I've ended up in my life. But once I get there, I can act as though I have been sent by God. As you go, make disciples.
Yeah, and we'll discuss that idea some more, I bet, in what we're about to talk about is my guess, because that was the main part of it. It was so good. So well done, John. So we're going to start with, each one of us is going to go around. We're going to have a question, observation, a highlight from this morning's message. So, Lori, what really stood out to you this morning?
Well, I'm going to start with the end, because I loved, and I'm just curious what your answers would be. I was intrigued by the question, how would Jesus live my life if he were me? Like, when you think about that with yourself, I know for me, like, Jesus would be a lot more focused than I am. Because
wouldn't sweat the small stuff.
And not do 50,000 things at one time.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
I'm picturing, because, he's fully man, fully God. He knows what it all looks like.
Yeah.
And so talking about the eternal life, the life to come would be he would express that so clearly and with such absolute confidence. Of course, I don't know why I don't do the same, but I just think if Jesus were living my life, he would speak about an eternity with God as though it were indeed the most important decision anybody could ever make, because he knows it to be true.
Yeah. I just think about how he would care for the people around him, their physical needs. You think about like when he fed the 5,000 people, when he turned water to wine, all those things. But then also their spiritual needs, and like value that just as highly as their physical needs.
He wouldn't miss a chance to be a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
You know, Abby, I was in Honduras this past week, and one of the things we did was we did a street feed where we went out at night and fed the people on the street, and most of them were addicts. And Amber with Breaking Chains said, don't focus on what they're doing, but just love them where they are. And so that's exactly what you were talking about.
And that seems like that's what Jesus did all the time too, you know, because when he would talk to them, and then he would say, now sin no more, but that wasn't always how he started. Right. He started by just meeting them where they were. Absolutely. Yeah, it's so good. What about you? What was a big highlight?
Okay, all right. So, I'm losing it. We may have to do yours. I forgot what mine was.
Okay, we'll come back
no,
to
I remember it now.
Okay.
Hey, when you turn somebody's life upside down, it's never just them. I mean, somewhere in all of our family stories, somebody told somebody in our family about Jesus. And now, however many generations or years ago that was, here we are still standing at this table talking about Jesus. So you change their whole household.
Yeah.
And then you change generations after that. So, a sense of urgency for the opportunities to tell someone about Jesus. It's never just them. It's their family. It's the next generation. And the one after that. Change it all.
I love that story he shared about Brother Beamer, because, he said he couldn't read, he couldn't write, so, we were talking about this before about it's not about your ability, it's about your availability. And so he got that news, and then he didn't have a PhD, but he went and told people, and then it changed generations.
All of those first apostles, how many of them could actually read and write? Maybe a couple?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they're a bunch of fishermen.
They could catch fish,
Yeah, they could, that's right.
They're just out there turning the world upside down. That's all they're doing.
So good. Well, I wrote down a lot of the same things you guys said. The whole thing about scattered, like you said in the intro, it's not about, they were scattered, but they lived as if they were sent there. And so I don't know, this wasn't my one, but I was going to ask y'all about that, the kind of the idea of blooming where you're planted. But then sometimes you intentionally need to plant yourself in a place that's scary. Do you know what I mean? Because it'd be easy to go, well, I don't want to go to Honduras. I don't want to, you intentionally put yourself in a potentially harmful, maybe scary place, when you went on that mission trip, but you didn't have to do that. Right. You could have gone to Florida with friends. You could have done whatever. And so sometimes we still have to kind of plant ourselves in tricky places, right? You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, but also where I just live too,
there's,
and
there's
here,
the
and
kind of
safe
the
places.
as you go through life piece, but then there's the you were called piece. So I do think sometimes the Spirit of God calls a person to go to a place and do a specific thing. But in the meantime, if you're waiting on what that calling might be, make disciples right where you are.
Okay, that wasn't my one, so it doesn't count.
Oh.
But here's what I was
big four.
The big four.
Well, what I wanted to say was I just love where he said, when Jesus is preached, people will respond. Because I think sometimes we think we have to make all these things happen, and we kind of take out the Spirit's power in it, and we say, no, I'm going to be the one, and if I don't do it just right, just talk about Jesus. Tell them about Jesus. Start there, because he said when Jesus is preached, people will respond.
And he's preached through our actions as well.
Right, yeah.
Like if we're unsure about what to say, just love people. Just like we were talking about. Just be the hands and feet of Jesus.
For sure.
Yeah, which takes a lot of the pressure off, because it's not about your presentation of Jesus. It's about Jesus himself and then what he does. Hey, man, just bring his name up. You get the ball rolling. He'll do all the heavy lifting.
Ask to pray for somebody and see what happens. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
or
good.
as they say, my bad presentation of Jesus is probably better than the one that I'm not doing now. So
the
just give it
zero.
a shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, if you have any more questions, would you please let us know by using that QR code that you see on the screen?
And if you want to rewatch this sermon or watch it for the first time, you can find it at boulevard.to/sermons. That wraps up this week's Big Three.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us. Look for this podcast on all your favorite platforms, and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big Three.